I've been asked to come here to give you an outside-in perspective on education. And my outside-in perspective is basically formed by working for 20 years with what you could call the finest product of our educational system. As a leadership consultant, I've had the privilege to work with those who have come out with the best institutions, with the best marks, and have given me an idea about our educational mold. But it also comes from my experience as a parent. And specifically, what was just introduced, a 5-year-long experiment whereby we actually ran our own school. But if we go for an outside-in perspective, why don't we go all the way out and look at our world from a bit of a distance? This wonderful planet with the perfect living conditions. And we, as the most intelligent species of all, have made a tremendous progress. Now, that progress is partly due to the fact that I think we are the only species who have a specific role cut out in our colonies to educate our young, to prepare them for their future. And here we are. They even gather for meetings like this. We're pondering about this question, but immediately that brings up another question. What is the future that we're talking about? And I know, there's so many people talk these days about the 21st century skills and how can we even imagine what roles we prepare those children for who, will be ready for society in 20 years from now with the incredible fast change that we see happening in our society. Rather than just guessing about all these uncertainties that are surrounded about this future that we're looking into, this crystal ball, why don't we focus on the things that are very certain that will happen? This will be the future of our children. And whether it's the pollution of our air, our waters, or our land, the loss of biodiversity, the depletion of fertile soil, which should grow our food, or global warming. These are the certainties that our children face for their future. And so, as a parent, at the beginning of this millennium, our children were born basically all around the beginning of the new millennium. We were a bit lost as to what we would leave behind. I think this is a question that you all ask as parents, yeah? What do we leave behind for our children? But basically, this is the situation that we're looking at. We live as if we have 2 planets. At the current rate, by 2030, we will use yearly the resources that will take 2 planets to regenerate. And to give you a bit of perspective, the moment that I was born on this planet, that was only half. In 13 years, it will be double. That brings me to the real question we should ask ourselves. If this is the situation, and this is the certainty that we run into, and some of these developments we don't even have control over for the next 30 years because we have already put it in motion, we're reaching critical points of no return. In this situation, what should we teach our children? These were the questions that we were facing. And especially in my work day to day, where I was basically confronted with the over-rationalized educational system that put out brilliant minds, but just minds. And where I had a tremendous effort every day in my work to work with these business leaders, those who have done very well in our educational system, to actually get a little bit back into their awareness, into their intuition, into their sensing self rather than their thinking self. We started to wonder whether we should send our kids to school at all. And these questions turned into our quest. Because most of all, I started to realize when I was looking at my life that we ourselves were very much part of that system. Even though we saw ourselves as very forward-thinking, conscious people, we were very much part of that system. And so our quest became, how could we actually get a new perspective on the world we live in, on this life that we have created with all these conditions? And we decided to break away. We found a place that seemed ideal, the wilderness on the border with Canada and northern Michigan, where we bought a piece of woodland, where we started anew. And part of this experiment was to actually be away from the system, but also to take our children out of the schooling system and school them ourselves. So we built a house, we built a little garden to grow our own food. We also built a little schoolhouse in a log cabin. And apart from the draw of the wilderness there, a big part of the reason why we moved there was a clan of Native Americans who we had met, people who had really gone back to tracing back their roots, their heritage, their original teachings. And we thought we could learn a lot from them. And it was only 3 years into living there, a very simple life, that we met this man, who again put our world a little bit upside down because of the wisdom that he carried. We're talking about a man who had not been to university, had not been to major schools, who had basically been living his life in the woods. Yet I've never been touched so deeply by the wisdom of someone like him. And long story short, when you start taking intuitive decisions, like we did, it seems that one triggers another. And ultimately, we decided that what we had found there should be filmed. Somebody had to do it, so we thought, well, might as well be us. And we started filming with Nawatan. Nawatan, actually, his name means he who listens. But we realized there's more people like him. And so we actually traveled a year around the world with our children to find other wisdom keepers, to actually capture what these people see is necessary for our world today. And yes, part of this adventure was that we had now a school on the road, where we literally made the world the classroom for our children. Now, rather than tell you a long story about this journey, I thought it would be better to give you a little bit of an impression by showing a little clip of the film.
We had a beautiful way at one time, how we viewed the world. Somewhere along the way, I think the original teachings got lost among all the people.
最も俺は間違って今はみんな暮らしてると思う。
Dari nalikuwa siasa na kwa baisho. Ya madori gari dengan gua pe bawe. Gua aja ba bisio gua madori na uyoga gele.
Patalang school nga learning mangen wukere yana bele university. Abana bele same. It's here and there. Nothing comes out. Namaya bela.
Nanakama Iliakut Nishpukisma Ie Mas Iliakut Nishpukisma Ie.
This is all the road there is when you realize that you are not satisfied the way things are. That you start being a seeker. Not somebody else's truth, but your own.
We launched his film in Amsterdam 8 months ago, and it's still running in cinemas throughout Holland. It's overwhelmed us a little bit, the response that this film has created. We are asked often what we think it is. Personally, I think it has to do with the fact that it touches on something that we all know very deep inside and that wants to be awoken. I just want to share with you what I have learned from coming back into this reality. What I see is an old world model, a non-sustainable model, running itself down. Trying to cling on and protect its vested interests. These are not the interests of our children. Definitely not the interests of the next generations. But I'm not pessimistic, because like the Earth Keepers, I see this happening as well. All the Earth Keepers, irrespective from where they were, feel that what we see happening in the world today, all the mayhem, all the problems that we're facing, as just symptoms of a transformational shift that is about to happen. In fact, I think it's already happening. I think we're here. We don't see it because the media that we take in are still old world. But if you really start looking, there is initiatives everywhere that want to emerge, that are emerging, and people jumping on the bandwagon. Now, it doesn't have a name yet, maybe, or a definite shape, but I have no doubt that it's happening. And since I'm back from the journey, I've gone back into the corporate world and chosen to only work with organizations who are truly determined to be part of this new world model, to seek circular economy models, to be responsible for what they produce, what they create, and the footprint that they leave behind. And it's amazing to see that a concept of wisdom-based leadership is actually something that people have a tremendous interest in. So I see all this happening in the corporate world, and then the strange thing is, what's happening to the schools? What's happening to the universities? I don't see the same manner of change. I see a system, a school system, that's still trying to serve the old world. I mean, there are exceptions, but mainstream educational system is not changing at the rate that actually the real world out there is changing. So there's this strange discrepancy. I mean, there's companies, new world companies, not just holistic startups, but old world companies who want to transform and have a hard time recruiting students with the ability to think in a new world manner. And I'll tell you in a minute what that is about. And what we are doing is, we have a system that has adopted all the old world corporate methods of control. Key performance indicators. Do we have teachers in this room? Who loves those performance indicators? Not too many. But what we are doing is we're basically tightening that straitjacket that teachers were already in. And whilst we are working in corporations where people say, now we see that this didn't work for us, we see that it didn't realize the potential of our people, and we've seen that it actually created just a short-term focus. And we are working to get leaders back into their heart space, in their authentic self, and loosening up, giving them more room to be. I don't see this happening in the school system. So it brings us back to the question, why do we actually educate in this day and age? We can make a multiple choice and make it easy. Do we really educate to make our youngsters fit into a system that is not sustainable? Or do we just teach them to see how they can come out on top? Or is it about something else? I color-coded for you because that makes life simple. I think it's clear where our attention and focus should be. Now, to come back to what I see in the corporate world, people come in from universities already programmed, focused on giving answers and finding solutions, jumping to conclusions. I can't even begin to tell that this is the most difficult task I have in the corporate world, to get leaders out of their zone, out of their headspace, out of their understanding that it's about the value of their opinions. Well, I'll tell you, in the new world reality, we actually see opinions as being the biggest hurdle for reaching potential. Because nobody has the answers for the complex problems that we're facing by themselves. And more, we have to rely on people that are able to make the observations of what is wrong, not what they think, but what they feel is intuitively wrong, and then ask the cut-the-crap questions. And it sounds funny, but that's actually the most difficult skill there is. Who has the right questions and can steer a dialogue? And we see that it's actually working. Are we teaching those skills in schools? Why do we teach children that they have to provide the right answers? They have to have an opinion. They have to find solution to problems. Whereas in this new world paradigm, it's much more important to ask the right questions. And that's what I mean, that there is a need for a much more down-to-earth type of education. And I'll try to give you a little bit of a hint of what I mean with that. And for that, I go back to what I learned from the Earth Keepers, what we can learn from the Earth Keepers. This is what they see. In this time of connection, we are so hopelessly disconnected from who we truly are. As Nawatan says in the film, we have lost our original teachings. I mean, this is really the problem of our time. We are disconnected from who we truly are, and this brings about the irreplenishable thirst for consumption. The seeking of, these fake securities. But it also brings about the new illnesses of our time. You know what the biggest epidemic is soon? What's the biggest epidemic? Mental health, depression. We can account obesity to that as well. So, how do we get back to being connected? What needs to be reconnected? This is where it starts. In any community that we have been, this is where education starts. It starts in nature, having a connection with our source, where we come from. Where has this gone in our education? There's children who never even see nature in our city schools. This is actually where our awareness is nourished. This is where our curiosity comes from. And isn't it funny that we actually live in a country where there's 58 learning goals defined by our Ministry of Education. And of these 58 goals, there's not one that actually points at the relation that we have with nature, with our source, with our earth. That's how far we've drifted off. And from that, nature actually gives us also a sense of self. And that's the next one. Maybe this is the biggest one that we actually have to consider when we look at ourselves as educators preparing our children for their future, is to connect with themselves. In this time of social media, we all know that this is actually going downhill quickly. The ability to be one truly self. Whereas this is where our real potential resides. It's about time that we're going to put at the center of our education the unique innate skills that everyone has. Because nobody has all the answers, like I said before. And where in companies, every company where you go, people are getting aware of the fact that they can only sustain if they are working on the diversity. What do we do with that diversity in our classroom? And I realize this will be the biggest transformational shift that we have to look for. But there is examples. There is great alternative ways that people try to educate children in our country and in the rest of Europe. And we have to take a look at that. Now, I wasn't saying that it was going to be easy, but it's definitely where we need to head. And that brings us to the ability to connect with others. Because if we have that self-confidence, that self-awareness, then we can reach out with empathy. Then we can co-create. Co-creation is what will help us lead us out of this abyss that we are into. We will need our collective intelligence, our collective creativity, and our collective consciousness to create that change that we're looking for. We already see it in successful applications of people searching for circular economy models. This is how they get there. It's not just listening to the smart people who had the most years of study or whatever, or have the most intellect. No, it's using all these different skills and angles to co-create new solutions that are sustainable. And last but not least, this is where it all heads to. If we get that self-confidence instead of the I confidence that we're creating now, if we're going to create that awareness, then we can become the conscious beings that we need, simply. To start dreaming. And imagination is probably the strongest power that we have. Nawatan says it in the film. He said the only power that we were given as human beings was the power to have dreams and visions. And I would like to formulate this New World education as to how we can nurture the abilities and unique gifts that our pupils have for them to become the sustainable beings they were born to be. And to bring forth the change makers that the world so desperately needs. And we will need all of you to make this happen. It will require choices, it will require leadership, it will require our creativity, but most of all, it will also require for us to start listening to our own intuitive knowing. I thought that was an idea worth sharing. I thank you very much.